Buns here. I just wanted to share how I've used virtual reality and actually video games over the last 10 or 15 years or so, and how that's evolved. Most of the applications that we've used with the HTC Vive that you're seeing here have been more in research settings than in classroom settings per se. The devices that Dr. Ross showed are very student friendly. They're a little bit more affordable, where it might be more feasible to have small group sessions at the same time where everybody is engaging. With this set, we just have one, the HTC Vives. It is not as sophisticated as some of the newer ones as well, where you can see all the cords that are involved, and you almost have to be a IT expert to install all the plugs that we have in the computer here. But one of the things that we've done is, just to back up a little bit, video games and then virtual reality have been used for years as an effective instructional tool. And so VR has been used for helping practitioners improve their surgical procedures, for physical education teachers to actually learn new skills. That could be a real challenge for movement professionals, is you may have a performer that is attempting to learn a variety of different skills or sport movements, and you may be limited in your knowledge. And so virtual reality can provide immediate synchronous feedback on certain movement skills. And over the years, my initial interest actually started as a doctoral student. This is when the Nintendo Wii was still popular and existed. And I used that study to examine the relationship between the real world basketball skills and video game skills using Nintendo Wii, finding that there was a positive association. The better you were at real basketball shooting and dribbling, the better you were playing NBA Live 2008 specifically. That study was followed up with an Xbox study where we examined coaching behavior for football coaches, and we found that there was a relationship, or there was an opportunity for video games to improve accuracy and speed of decision making for coaches and for performers. And then that led to a more recent study here, where originally I honestly wanted to do an intervention training for track and field skills, especially for throwing skills, understanding that the throwing, the discus and shot put in track and field, it's a very technical move. Not a lot of coaches, depending on the level, are necessarily equipped to provide that type of technical feedback on such a complicated skill. If you've ever been around the sport, you know that it's not just simply about having strong arms and throwing based on your strength. Unfortunately, at that time, the VR technology had not caught up to what we were looking to do. And so I'd gone through IRB and everything, and then actually realized, well, we don't have a good VR training system for those track and field events yet. So we switched to hockey, and as part of that study, I did a 6-week intervention on the effectiveness of virtual training on real-world hockey skills. And what we found was that the treatment group compared to control significantly improved their puck accuracy and velocity over the course of just 6 60-minute sessions. So a relatively weak intervention improved puck accuracy and velocity compared to the control group. And then also what was worth noting was that we also determined the speed accuracy trade-off doesn't just exist in real world performances, but in this study, those performers that improved their accuracy the most improved their velocity the least. So most performers improved accuracy and velocity, but as your accuracy increased, your velocity didn't. So again, suggesting that there is a speed accuracy trade-off effect existing in the virtual space as well. Just to orient you to this space a little bit, everything that you can see in the HTC Vive, you can also see on the computer screen if you have onlookers standing by. Everything in here you can see there. Unfortunately, we're having some glitches with our TV right now. Otherwise, the audio and visual will also display on any TVs that you have set up to the device as well. We also use some internal grant funding just to purchase some pads in this area here. Unfortunately, it doesn't really protect the headset or the hands at all. And so you'll see this is banged up a little bit. It's been battered and bloodied a little bit, but it's still operable at this point. And I found that it's helpful for all ages. And so we've had participants, homeschool kids as young as 8 years old, all the way up to adults that have participated. And for most of the work we've done, we've included about a 15, 20-minute familiarization period to get oriented to the software before we do it. So the game that we have here, it's interesting. It actually can allow you to shoot and actually records results for accuracy percentages and then also the velocity of your shot. Also loaded here is more of a goalie game, so you can actually practice. I don't have any participants that want to do this, but you can actually get in the mind of a goalie and shoot pucks that are being thrown your way as well. Is there anything else that we're noting at this point?
If you wanted to.
Anybody want to volunteer?
I can try. Not gonna be very.
And so hopefully the camera can pick up the screen. You'll be able to see what Dr. Davies is seeing right here. We don't have the audio at the moment, but if you don't want to unfortunately our computer doesn't have speakers. But this device does come with some separate earplugs as well if you'd like the participant just to be wearing those. So we'll go ahead and let Dr. Davies put this on. Thank you. That's what you get, huh?
I know, leave this.
Try not to tip over Mr. Bones. And then there's also worth noting, we have installed our infrared cameras on both walls that create the diameter of the space. And so when Dr. Davies is holding the devices, she's going to see kind of a grid that's outlined virtually. And you can see here she's the goalie. And this is hard to believe, but we did not rehearse any of this. And that's with the Jason mask is Dr. Davies there, protecting some goals here. And this wasn't used with any studies yet, but just kind of showing you what that space could look like. Unfortunately, you don't really sense how immersive it is without actually putting the headset on yourself. But here's the time to everyone blackmail Dr. Davies. Yeah, just a good time to take some screenshots.
Yeah, upload them.
How are you doing? We're seeing some goals here, expecting that net. Again, we also have opportunities as a student. If you're an online student, you're welcome to set up a data collection phase where we can help you find participants, and then you can come on campus just to collect data. So there's opportunities where this would be something that's hard to mail to you. Dr. Ross's devices could feasibly be sent out and then returned. But if you want to come to campus, regardless of VR research or anything else, we invite you to campus and we can help with the participant recruitment and perhaps set a time where over the course of one day or several days, you could come take advantage of the laboratories here for some type of on-site intensive data collection.
In this,
do you have any questions about any of this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing on the screen is not what she was seeing. She was seeing it from the point of view of the.
Oh, you're right. Yep, that's actually right. Yeah, in this case, this is gonna be a bad example. What you're seeing here is actually not what she was seeing.
Can you turn it?
We were seeing it from
What I'm seeing?
typically, and this is maybe a bad example to show here. I don't know if I can change that view.
You can because Sam had it.
Well, we have another game going on this thing. If we close out of it and restart it.
It's fine.
Yeah.
You can get it to be a different view, so we had it going the other day and it was showing what I was seeing with the puck coming and so.
Yeah, and that's a good question because in terms of skill development, there are differences between how well you are associated with the experience. Are you getting a bird's eye view? There can be a learning effect there if you are seeing your movements kind of from the sky, so to speak. And there can also be some, proprioceptive advantage to, really immersing yourself into that setting. And that gets to the mental practice thing too. So I know you mentioned the Boston Marathon, and in cross country, I know we'll actually get a camera out and walk the entire 8K, 10K course, so we can allow the athletes to mentally practice with that layout as well. That can also help with things like hills and trees when you need to navigate the course that way. So yeah, definitely, mental practice is never as good as physical practice, but it's better than no practice at all. And when you combine mental practice with physical practice, you're always going to get the same benefits. So we're not saying in this case that virtual training has necessarily been found to be more effective than real world training, but it can supplement some of the work that you might be doing. If you're trying to teach a skill, in this case, if I'm asked to be if I'm coaching in high school and I have to, or junior high, and I have to coach every single event, I know nothing about the throwing events, and so maybe you can use video games or virtual training to help foster some of that feedback and training. Any other questions? I don't know why I'm holding this.
So I have a question related to like the HTC, and then that compared to like an Oculus or something similar to that. Has there been, if you know, Dr. Buns, any research on the differences, benefits of either, both? Like, are they basically going to be the same thing? Or can you talk to maybe some of the advantages or disadvantages for using one over the other?
Yeah, good question. So I can't specifically speak to any differences between the Oculus and the HTC Vive, for example. I do know from other research that when it comes to mental practice or visual representations, the more real world or accurate the experience is, the more beneficial it would be. But there are surprising effects to even old school, 1980s and 90s golf video games, where you can learn a lot about proprioception and the timing of events by they've actually found that putters in golf can improve by playing like a Sega Genesis, where just pushing an A or B button has actually been found to improve real world golf performance. But the differences I can speak to, so Steve Ross actually brought his personal Oculus here. He's the expert on this, and I am not, but one of the things he just told me earlier, I asked about, why do we have this HTC Vive with all these cords and plugins when, this is much more portable. There's not a single wire. You don't need a computer at all for this Oculus. It's also cheaper. I think, not to recall everything that Dr. Ross said, but there are maybe the visual images aren't quite as clear or complex as with the Oculus, or I'm sorry, as with the Vive. But this is a little cheaper, a little more user-friendly. And then even the newer, one disadvantage with the Vive is that the newer ones, actually, you can get wireless as well. But other times you can actually plug a hook up on the ceiling to keep the cords out of the way. One issue we have was hockey players are tripping over their own cords here.
And you'd need to have those mounted cameras for the HTC, right? Or...
Yeah, you do. Yeah, so it comes with, I don't know if you can see it over here, but we have one camera over here creating that perimeter. Then one camera over here. And once those are set up, they remain oriented to the space. And it's pretty helpful because it does provide you to create that self-contained grid with relative accuracy. But people still, I mean, you should have seen the hockey participants, when they were going for velocity with some of their shots there. You can see the mats here, not the best setup here. I mean, when you're swinging, unless you're 4 feet tall, this mat's not really helping you with some of the work you're doing.
One other just observation, because I have used both the HTC and the Oculus. Have you seen in the participants that have been using either of those any sort of like loss of equilibrium or balance while they have that on, or like you know what I'm trying to say? Because I used the Oculus, and then I had my daughter who's 7 use the Oculus, and my 7-year-old almost fell over right when she put it on because it was so almost disorienting putting on something like that and then looking around and not really knowing like where
Yeah.
you are in space, if that makes sense. So have you seen any of that happen with any of your participants? Which
Personally, I have not seen that with any of our participants, and I was actually pretty impressed because some of the participants were quite young. And in that study, we also controlled for, of course, video game experience and tried to assess their familiarity with those programs. And we had a lot of individuals that most of them have never used a headset like that before with virtual training at all. And I didn't see any. What was more difficult was just the younger kids sometimes were obviously a little more clumsy, perhaps with figuring out the puck control, as you might expect. But that's
I was sort of wondering the same thing. And along those lines, do you know of any VR research looking at maybe TBI rehab, concussion rehab, or anything with vestibular balance issues, where there's a program that sort of you track some movement within the VR, and then the software tracks the movement of your head to see if there are differences between, a control group and people with some kind of TBI.
Yeah, there actually is a relatively emerging amount of literature used in rehabilitation, specifically in physical therapy, using VR. I can't comment on some of the details of those studies, so I'd embarrass myself if I tried. But I know it has been there is a decent amount of research with concussion research and balance research and rehabilitation in general that's been used. My focus, I'm a lot more familiar with the efficacy of virtual training to improve like motor skill performance, kind of isolated psychomotor skills specifically. But one byproduct that I have noticed with the virtual training as well is just how much participants tend to enjoy the learning experience as well. And so Dr. Ross was a co-author on the study that validated a sport video game motivation instrument. And I implemented that in this study. From pre to post, we found that participants, their motivation towards sports and video games actually increased just over a 6-week period significantly. And so they tend to enjoy the learning process. That could be an advantage of this as well. Again, it's never as good as a physical practice per se, but there is a positive learning effect, and enjoyment is really important when it comes to learning skills as well. I also find it unique that the general body of research in virtual training video games also finds that virtual games are able to detect levels of expertise with performers as well. So there is a pretty strong correlation, again, between this work and a lot of real world skills, and in terms of being able to detect levels of expertise. So for example, a Division I basketball player versus maybe somebody the same age that has never played before or achieved various physical scores. So that detection level is, I think, a unique attribute as well. It's pretty sensitive to the skills, especially once you control for video game experience.